All right. I think we are live. Yep. Well, I put on the title. You and I would talk about 2024 and kind of look at the year. If you can, I mean, so much has happened in just the last month. It's hard to remember going back to the beginning of the year. It seems like ancient history.
Yeah, it's
Wherever you
been
want to start,
amazingly busy year. So are we on the live stream right now?
we're live.
Okay.
You guys can hear me in the chat. Give me the thumbs up.
I can't see the chat. Oh, here we go. Got it.
Yeah, you got it.
Yep.
You know, I did a 5-hour chat the other day, 5.5 hour.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was, and I wasn't even planned. Like I wasn't even going to do it. I had done a video the night before, and YouTube deleted it because of some medical comments I made,
Oh,
which I didn't
wow.
realize we were
Oh,
still
I saw that
under
one
that
that was deleted. That's pretty
banner
crazy.
of censorship. Yeah. But yeah, so it's like, well, I'm going to redo that video, and I'm splitting it up. I did 2 different parts to it, and then I decided to go ahead and just do the first part on day before yesterday. And that was ended up being, I was 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, and then Pastor Gary got on the chat, and I invited him on, and then he and I talked for another couple hours. So by the time it was all said and done, it was like 5.5 hours.
I'm looking forward
Oh
to
man,
going to visit with Gary and his friends over there in Ireland. That's going to be a fun trip.
yeah, yeah. And I asked him the other day what he thought the theme should be, and since in light of Trump's victory and all that, so he was thinking something about New World Order, or something to
Oh,
that
yeah.
effect. So we'll see. So
Well,
I
here's
gotta
an
I gotta
interest.
tell you, man,
Yeah.
this year has accelerated from January till today, and I think it's gonna just keep getting crazier. What do you think?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I think it's a mistake for people this late in the game to think that President-elect Trump or any Republican or anybody is going to stop the acceleration of the New World Order. Now, I'm not a doubt in my mind that we're going to see some death blows delivered to the extreme left Marxist version of the New World Order. But I fully anticipate to see the Republican Party, like they've been doing since the Bushes, to be laying in absolutely necessary groundwork for the New World Order.
Yeah, I feel like the the Trump victory did 2 things. One, it slowed the march towards globalism, but at the same time, it accelerated the prophetic timeline that we're on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It
Does
makes
that make
perfect
sense?
sense to me. In
Yeah,
fact,
and I
what I've
feel
been
like, go ahead.
I was just going to say what I was thinking of. It's definitely is like someone in a big one of the all-star wrestling picking up his opponent and doing an atomic drop. I mean, this is an absolute smash to the leftist version of the New World Order. There's no doubt about it. The question I have, though, is it actually going to slow the acceleration to globalism? Or are we just changing to a different version of it? I mean, I've long suspected that the real difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, if you're going to boil it down and toss out a few exceptions, is that the Democrats want a new world order where Europe is going to rule the world or the UN is going to rule the world. And the Republicans want a vision of the new world order where if America isn't running it per se, the principles that she believes in is what the New World Order or the globalist order is going to abide by. Now, that said, we know that the bell curve for the Republican Party has been drifting left, and it's in a centrist position right now. So it doesn't really shake out to be as great as it might sound at first glance.
I don't know. This is a very different political season than it was the first two times he ran. So the first time he ran, he was the outsider to the Republican Party. He won the electoral vote, didn't win the popular vote, and he didn't even think he was going to win. He was just as surprised as everybody else because the polls and all that, and it just seemed inevitable that Clinton was going to win. And then that didn't give him a lot of time and a lot of preparation, and running for president the first time, you've got thousands of cabinet picks you got to do, hundreds of cabinet picks you got to do. And he just didn't have the staff with him. And then he had, the investigations and all that stuff from day one. I don't think he was having to always fight that battle over here, but then try to get his own agenda pushed through over here. And it just, plus he had the Republican Party for the Congress, who were still a lot of never Trumpers in there, and enough in there to kind of thwart any kind of agenda he had. And so this time around, and he had about a half of that support in 2020, but I think everything that's come about since then. I mean, he is the Republican Party. He is taking the Republican Party in the MAGA direction. He is got a younger vice president who will be his successor, who should we be here, or he not live out or work out his full term, his vice president is just as passionate about a lot of these things as he is, and he's well spoken, articulate, incredibly smart. I'm trying to think of all the positive things, but then he's got the plurality, or he's got the plurality of Republican governors in the states. A plurality of the state legislatures are Republican. He's got a conservative-leaning Supreme Court bench. He's got he won the electoral vote with the landslide, and then got the popular vote by 5 million plus. There's a lot of things different this time, and the vibe is different too. I think the last 4 years were a big wake-up call for a lot of people to see just how far left the Democrats were willing to take the country. And I think honestly, I think it scared a lot of people. People that normally weren't political, like the Amish. 80, 90,000 of them. I don't know how many came out, but it was a lot. It was like almost 100,000.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing story in Pennsylvania, where there are some of those more rural counties where the whole convoys of buggies showed up to the voting stations.
I would have loved to have been there for that.
Oh man, that would be awesome. Well, what's interesting about this too is the Republicans have been talking for 2 decades about having the Republican tidal wave, and it never materialized. It never materialized. And I think really the difference this time wasn't so much that the Republican message has changed. I think they did focus on things that needed to be focused better than they have at times in the past. But the real thing was the Democrat Party stood on such hard left ground that many moderate Democrats and independents, swing voters, were uncomfortable with the platform. They're not going to change the fact that they're registered Democrats. If a JFK or a RFK type Democrat runs in the future, they'll probably vote for them. But for the time being, they appreciate the MAGA platform. And, as you said, there's things to appreciate about it. This platform is going to give the Christians more freedom in the near term. It's undoubtable. It's going to be, unless something drastic happens, this will prove to be an economic blessing for America. It's probably going to reduce our taxes, reduce the price of fuel. It's going to bring about more common sense in business. We're going to see businesses exploding again and growing again. Oil's going to boom again. The economy is going to boom again. Our military is going to boom again. We're going to be a geopolitical force to be reckoned with. Again, America will be made great again. But on the other side, I find myself wondering, is this actually going to be a more difficult environment for the church to thrive in? Now, obviously, we thrive in one level when we have freedom, and we're going to have freedom. But if people are operating under the belief that the globalism threat has been beheaded, that the New World Order has been, if not stopped, slowed, then I think there's great potential here for people to see things that they need to see, that no matter what we think the motives are of any individuals that we see in politics, no matter what we think Trump's motives are, the globalist deep state, the global cabal, has their fingers in the pie much deeper than most people appreciate. And if they don't have control of this train right now, they will gain control of it. There's just no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. And have you heard the 10 things that Trump wants to do to dismantle the deep state?
Oh, I don't know if I've seen the same list you have. I've seen a number of things put out there, but going after the FDA, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Here they are. I got them here.
Okay, go ahead.
So, restoring presidential authority to fire federal or remove federal employees. He had already passed, or he had already done this in 2020. He did that before he left office, and he's gonna bring that back. Overhauling the national security intelligence. So he plans on removing individuals from intelligence agencies and national security agencies and remove their clearances. So a lot, like those guys that came out in 2020. I think it was 50 or 90 of the former intel generals and folks that said that the Hunter computer was Russian disinformation or something to that effect. He's going to remove their clearances. Number 3 is a reform of the FISA courts. Number 4 is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So he plans on establishing a commission to declassify and make all documents public related to the alleged deep state activities like spying, censorship, and corruption. Crack down on leaks. So if you're leaking, they're going to pursue you for legal matters or whatever, or legal criminal conduct. An independent auditing system that monitors intelligence agencies to prevent unauthorized surveillance of citizens or disinformation campaigns. Number 8 is the geographic redistribution of bureaucracy. So they're going to move a lot of the federal agencies that are in DC and move them out across the country. Number 9 is the post-government ban on employment. So you can't hold an office where you are overseeing a particular type of industry, like a secretary of whatever, and then once you leave that position, you can't go work for that job. You can't go work for the board of directors on Raytheon or whatever, or vice versa, And then number 10 is the term limits for Congress. So,
yeah. So the FDA stuff is a completely different issue than that's. I know that Musk, not Musk, but RFK is going after that. Elon has his own things he wants to go after with the digital currency and the robotics and the high-end tech. It's going to be an interesting
NASA.
world. Stuff is going to accelerate.
Oh yeah. So I was talking last night, and I got asked the question, and I was doing Revelation 13, and the way that I described the structure for the world government, for that government. Let me see if I can pull it up. But the question came about on what it would look like between now and then, because the Democrats have been very conciliatory. I mean, first of all, so we had the election on Tuesday. You, me, about 99% of everybody else in America expected the results to drag on until like December or probably like January. We wouldn't know 100% who was the president. But it was like that red wave you're talking about. I mean, it was a tidal wave, tsunami kind of wave. I mean, it was red. And the I think it's kind of like July 14th, the day after the assassination attempt failed. The day after November 6th was such a blowout, and so profoundly a blowout, that there wasn't any way to argue it. He
Yeah.
won the popular vote and he won the electoral vote, both by landslides. So it was, in a way, it was too big to rig. I mean, the turnout was, and like I said, we had 90,000 to 100 plus thousand Amish people who never vote came out and voted. Plus, Trump got, I think, half of the Hispanic male vote. He got a huge gains in the black community, huge gains in every other metric and demographic, young people. So it was crazy. And so I have to ask myself, based on Acts 17:26, if God is the one that appoints the leaders and sets the times and the boundaries for nations, what does this mean right now? And I kind of, I think you and I disagree a little bit on this part, but like, when I look at the seven letters to the seven churches, I look at those. They're not only applicable to the first century churches, second, third. It's applicable to every century. And it was, Jesus was speaking to the individual as well as the congregation, but just in the order that they are put in, there's, and how they're sequentially laid out. It seems like, when we look in hindsight, it looks like the church age kind of fits that. And I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but we live today. Today would be the Laodicean era, right? The age of the Laodicean church. And we also live at the same time where there's more Christian denominations than there's ever been in the history of the church. I've heard upwards of 33,000 or 40,000 different Christian denominations around the world, and different flavors of denominations. I mean, just think about how many different kinds of Baptist churches we have. And every other kind of even in the Catholic side, there's like 8 different branches just on the Catholic section, not on the non-Protestant side. So I don't know. And if that church is described, or maybe it's describing Western civilization, where Christianity would be dominant, or preeminent, I guess, in influencing culture. The fact that church is lukewarm, um, they think they're rich, they're really poor, blind, naked, etc. That to me seems like more like our day than at any time, because of how many, and look at the number of churches that have just completely abandoned sound doctrine over, whatever else, smoke machines and skinny jeans, pastors or whatever. So to me, I think that a Trump comeback politically, which then and you've got a lot of folks in the NAR, Dominionist, post-millennial, amillennial camps that are super excited that Trump won, because their understanding of eschatology is vastly different than yours and I.
That's right.
And I would look at a guy like Charlie Kirk, who I would agree with him on nearly 100% of cultural issues and religious issues, but he's looking at all of this right now. He's thinking in terms of like decades. We've got time to turn this nation around. And maybe in the back of his mind, he's thinking the Lord may come back at the end of the century, kind of thing. We're looking at this in like days, weeks, months, and years, single digit years, not
Yep.
double digit years. So I think that's, to me, and it's hard to put it into words. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you about it. We have true born again believers. And I'm just going to use Charlie Kirk as an example, as a type. I'm not saying that he believes in everything I'm talking about. I'm just using him as a popular example. You've got a guy like that who has the fundamentals of the faith. He's a born again believer. sincere, courageous, bold, brave, etc. God is using him to do things in the culture, but he's looking at all of this from a decades kind of standpoint, maybe even centuries. I don't know, but how do we bridge? Is there a bridge between the Christian believer like myself and you, who thinks we're right at the very end, and a guy like that who is doing great work and helping, you know, causes, and he's just out there in a much more national way than we are. How do we square that circle on that? Because you want to be um, you want to cheer him on. You want to cheer on those groups that are trying to break back common sense politics, or policies back into the nation. And we don't want to live under 4 more years of Harris or Obama-led or Clinton-led, Democrat-led tyranny. But at the same time, we know we're at the very end. I don't know. How do you square that circle personally?
I don't know if we can square it. It's been a rocky relationship for the last decade or so. As the post-millennial movement, the New Apostolic Reformation, the revival of the kingdom dominion thinking, as this stuff is strengthened and accelerated, it became a little bit of an uneasy ride with dispensationalists, because there's really two very different views of not only of eschatology, but of the church and her commission. For eschatology, the amillennial camp is more readily reconciled to the post-millennial camp than we are, because they can spiritualize the kingdom. So it's not very difficult for them to take that step towards the post-millennial camp. That's why so many of them are involved with it. The post-millennial vision says that we have been given a commission not only to see individuals saved, but to Christianize the nation and then Christianize the world, to bring them into, if not conversion, to conformity to the Ten Commandments, conformity to the Sermon on the Mount, conformity to Christian morality and ethics, to Christianize the media, to Christianize the education system, to Christianize the government. Now, this sounds great. I mean, who wouldn't love to be living in a world like that? But the problem is, the Bible teaches very clearly that the world right now is under the rulership or the headship of Satan. He's the god of the world. He's the prince of this world. The whole world lies in the wicked one. And that until this strong man is bound, you can't change the world. We can look back, for instance, at prohibition and realize that we succeeded in stopping the world on one small point, but it was only a superficial victory, because now alcohol went underground, and we had far more deaths from bad alcohol. We had far more crime. It gave rise to the modern mafia, really, in America. So a superficial victory brought worse sin. And so when we have this different version here, where they think they're supposed to Christianize the world, we think we are calling men out of the world. They think that this age is going to end when the world is Christianized and the kingdom has been established. We think the world is going to end when this church and this world apostatizes to the point of no return, and the tribulation starts, and we're going to be out of here before then. So it's two very, very different ways. And we can meet somewhat happily on moral ground, but on the ground of biblical ecclesiology, on the ground of biblical eschatology, it's like oil and water. They don't really mix.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and maybe you've noticed this too, but the pre-tribulation view is the only one that does not require government to be, there's no internal or external attempt to force Christianity into government or vice versa. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that?
Yeah, I have. And see,
Post,
what's interesting to me about this, if you will notice that in Revelation 17 and 18, that relationship between the two aspects of Babylon, we have the woman who rides the beast, and we have the beast. And who's the woman that rides the beast? Well, I think Dave Hunt and those who think his path are correct, that it is the harlot religion, no doubt led by the Catholic Church. Not, it certainly isn't exhausted by the Catholic Church. Riding the beast. Well, this has been true for the entire age. From the rise of religion under Constantine to be the state religion in the Roman Empire of Christianity, then from that time forwards, we have seen religion trying to dominate the state. And we see this all around the world. It's not just Christianity. In Islam, religion tries to dominate the states. In Buddhism, religion tries to dominate the states. In India, Hinduism tries to dominate the state. So no matter where we go, religion wants to dominate the state. And this is the woman riding the beast. We've got different versions of it. They're all going to come together in the last days in one apostate, one world religion. But it will still be the woman riding the beast. It will be religion. And that religion is going to be destroyed by the 10 toes.
yeah, and I've talked about this last night, and I struggle honestly with the idea that the false prophet is leading the harlot church. Because by the midpoint, the world leaders are, if he's the one that's heading up that church, and at the same time everybody hates it and ends up destroying it, and the 10 kings are of one mind and want to get rid of it. To me, the false prophet is more like a guy like Yuval Noah Harari. He doesn't say he's necessarily a religious guy. He may make the religion out of worshiping the Antichrist. Like, that's his religion. I mean, that's what he ends up doing. I tend to think that there is going to be some type of, if Satan is mimicking God, the Godhead, in the list of characters that we see in Revelation 13, Satan being the father, playing in the role of the father, the Antichrist obviously playing in the role of the Jesus Christ, and then the false prophet in the role of the Holy Spirit, then to me there's still somebody else that has to pretend to be John the Baptist, or somebody like a John the Baptist. So that to me would be a guy like Yuval Noah Harari, who's trying to be the herald of what's coming. And I'm not saying that it's him 100%. I'm just saying it's a guy like that. And we tend to think that the false prophet has to be religious. I don't. His religion is going to be worshiping the Antichrist. I mean, they are in
No doubt.
worshiping Satan.
Yeah.
So the John the Baptist, not prototype, the John the Baptist character that's brought into the satanic trinity, to me that would be like somebody that would be here to herald the harlot church in as the rapture removes the true believers out, and then you've got this guy trying to bring everybody together under one system, religious system, right?
Yep.
And then there's a lot of things that happen, Gog and Magog. There's the Isaiah 17, the culmination of Psalm 83, if it hasn't already culminated at that point. Any other kinds of things that need to be cleared up, the arrival of the two witnesses, the building of the third temple, and so on. So a lot of this stuff happens, I think, I don't know, at least within the first half. And if that includes a gap time period between the rapture and the actual official start of the tribulation, Daniel 70th week itself, I kind of see those things in that time period. Not super dogmatic on when they show up, but to me, that I keep wanting to call him the false prophet, that the John the Baptist antitype is the guy that leads that harlot church, and then by the midpoint, they're doing him dirty like they did Biden. They're going to kneecap him like they did Nancy Kerrigan.
Yep.
But then the false prophet then turns around and he says, "Hey, okay, that thing is gone. put your worship in this guy. Like it'll just be to that switch, and that's where he becomes kind of the spiritual advisor, if you will, at the kind of like around the midpoint once the Antichrist deifies himself while he's still living. And the only other emperor that I think that did that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was only Domitian, because even Tiberius, Julius Caesar, Nero, those guys were deified after they died, but Domitian was the first emperor that said, "I'm a living God," and he demanded worship as a tribune as a living God. And I think he was the one that started that. I don't know who else did it besides him, but this guy will declare himself to be God, and then the false prophet will be the guy that's his champion at that point, leading the world to worship him. I still kind of think there's a John the Baptist kind of guy somewhere that's probably around today, probably working in circles now to bring all the religions together. It may be the Pope, it may be the Pope after this Pope. We don't know. I don't know how many popes there's going to be, but yeah. What do you think? Is there a John the Baptist type in the satanic? That is the forerunner to the satanic trinity.
I haven't even really thought about like the head of the false religion being kind of like the Antichrist and having a sidekick that's like a John the Baptist or his own Antichrist. I hadn't really thought much about that. But I do think that you are, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's true, but I do think you're right that when we come to the literal Antichrist in the middle of the week and the literal false prophet who's requiring the world to worship the image of the beast and to worship the beast himself, this is already at the end of religion. So we shouldn't be looking for a religious leader to be the Antichrist or the false prophet. They're going to be the antithesis of it. It's going to be religious atheism. Now, but it is an interesting question about how it's going to work with when the world religion comes together. Certainly, if it's not headed by the Pope himself, it's going to be headed by a Pope-like figure. And he'll probably have a college of cardinals or something similar around him, leaders of the world religion, which is going to be pretty amazing. Everyone's going to be dropping their distinctives and racing to embrace this one world religion and not be the last one to get there. This is terrifying to see this because, well, we're not happy for this thing happening. I mean, but then we're not happy with the divisions that we see right now in the world. And yet when people go from the divisions between Islam and Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and every other religion, they go from there to abandoning those divisions and embracing one world religion. They're actually leaving the little bit of light that they have, and they're embracing pitch black darkness, which is a terrifying thought. Now, I do have one other thought I wanted to bring up, and I forgot about it. We were talking about the woman riding the beast, and we're looking around, we see amillennialism and postmillennialism trying to ride and dominate America. I think when we look around and we see amillennialism and postmillennialism trying to dominate American politics and trying to dominate European politics, this should be telling. This should illuminate our minds. We are looking at expressions or manifestations of the woman riding the beast. That's exactly what we're seeing. Dispensationalism doesn't do that. We have a testimony that we will testify to people that they should live right, they should think right, they should make right decisions in the courts, they should pass just laws in the legislature, that we should have uprightness in the executive office. We have no problem testifying to that. But dispensationalism as a whole doesn't try and ride the beast. We have a testimonial relationship, not whatever you'd call it, a dominating relationship.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I've kind of thought about this, and I can't remember. I think you believe that the America is the Babylon. I can't remember if that's you or what your position is on that, and I'll give you a second to clarify that. But if Trump's returned to politics and he's got both houses of Congress, he's got the majority in all the states, he's got the Supreme Court, and he's got the mandate because of the popular vote and the electoral victories. It seems to me that between now and, let's say, he served all 4 years out, because of his nationalism and his populism, he is going to drive the United Nations out of America. I wouldn't be surprised if they left halfway through and said, "Hey, we're relocating to Brussels, or we're going to relocate to Abu Dhabi, or whatever the case is." But they're going to relocate out of the United States as a protest against Trump and his tariffs and all the other stuff. And I see that more or less isolating the United States kind of back. And it seems like there's a segregation that's happening right now, in that in the European side and Eurasia, well, more Europe. But because there's going to be several different vacuums that open up, it's going to by default make Europe, the EU, the power structure that's left remaining. So, for example, the rapture of the church. Whenever that happens, that will have, to me, a much more devastating impact on the United States than it would Europe, just because of the number of Christians. Not that we have more Christians, but we have the number of Christians are serving in all different kinds of professions and levels of political office up and down the social strata. You don't have that in China. You don't have that in Russia. You don't have that in a lot of other non-Christian countries. But in the United States, it's very much in play here. So if the rapture were to happen, you would immediately have, at least on one political side of the house, a decimation by 30-40%, whatever that number is, right? So that's going to throw America into chaos. Then the economic collapse, the uncertainty, and all the UFO stuff, all the other stuff that will come about, will cause the United States to collapse. So that's the first geopolitical vacuum that happens. The second vacuum happens when Gog and Magog decimates the armies of Russia, Iran, Turkey, and all the other hordes that come against Israel. To me, that's decimating Islam, but it's also decimating those countries. So it's going to take the militantism out of Islam. If you've got tens of millions of Muslim males marching against Jerusalem from all different directions, and God wipes them out in this conflict, Islam is not going to be the force that it is today. And I think that's what helps envelop Islam back into whatever this global system will be, religion at the end. But then that's the two major vacuums. The third vacuum will be just from the three horns that the Antichrist takes over, and we don't know exactly what that is going to look like just yet. So we're seeing these vacuums. I guess to me, it just seems like things are being set up very clearly, and so whereas a Charlie Kirk would look at conditions and he's thinking, man, we got it good. We got 4 years with Trump, 8 years with JD Vance. And so he's thinking like, we're going to be rocking and rolling as the top nation for the next 20, 30 years. And I'm thinking like, I don't even see us getting out of the 2020s, So first of all, who is Babylon in your opinion? And then secondly, do you see that separation between the U.S. under Trump kind of moving and breaking away from the system, or not? The deep state always has a vote in this, right? If you got RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, Trump, all trying to dismantle the deep state, trying to dismantle the things that are wrong right now, which, RFK Jr. going up against big pharma, big food. The CEOs of like 5 major pharma companies had an emergency meeting the day after the election because of RFK Jr. coming in, right? So all that to say, what do you think on those two kind of points?
Well, the couple of things here that I would observe. First of all, when it comes to who Babylon is, the first point I would say is I believe it is the same thing as the Roman Empire. So that much is clear. Now, it's obviously it's the fractured, divided Roman Empire reconstituted. So it has to bear some close resemblance to the original Roman Empire, or we're not really talking about the Roman Empire. So that means it would include, no doubt, Europe, parts of North Africa, and the Middle East, and that would make up the Roman Empire. Now, when we see the golden image destroyed at the end of Daniel chapter 2, we see it taking down the whole image, which includes Babylon and Persia. So this implies that it's very possible that this Roman Empire is going to expand in the last days and absorb Iraq and Persia and bring them in to the eastern half of the Roman Empire. That would fit in with this Saudi Arabia Abrahamic Accord protocols that are trying to go forth right now. Now, as far as which nation is going to be the little horn that's going to dominate the 10 toes, I very strongly lean towards America. I don't know that I would be dogmatic about it. I'm dogmatic that Mystery Babylon is Mystery Babylon and not literal Babylon. But who that Mystery Babylon is another question. And people, there's room to debate that one. Now, when it comes to America, I've, for decades, since the early 90s, I have been convinced, well, maybe not the early 90s, certainly maybe by the late 90s, I was convinced that America would be the little horn, and that we're not going to merely be part of the Roman Empire, that we would rise to dominate it. There is indications in the literature of the secret societies and the Illuminati that they actually brought America into existence for the purpose of being the leader of the New World Order in the last days. They realized that no one European state was going to be able to dominate the other ones, that it wouldn't be tolerated. But if you take people from all those nations, bring them in together in a new world, bring the North Africans over, bring the Middle Easterners over, meld them all into one melding pot, and then give them the place of dominance, then that nation could lead the New World Order. So that's where I've tended to go with it. Of course, that's had me in the minority position for the past few decades, because since the 80s, we've had a string of books predicting the economic demise of America. And it didn't happen in the 80s, didn't happen in the 90s, didn't happen in the 2000s or the 2010s, and it's hasn't happened yet. And I think a lot of people are expecting it. They see a future where America is either not a power player, or she's absorbed as a second-rate nation into the European Union or the Roman Empire. So time is going to tell which of these pictures play out. I think it's probably a noble adventure to keep both of them in mind, not really get married to one or the other, just waiting to see how this little horn 10 toes thing shakes out. We know it's got to be Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and it could incorporate the former colonies, or the colonies of the fractured Roman Empire, so the colonies of Spain, France, and England. And that's about all we know. Which final order is going to rise is another question.
Yeah, let me see if I can share this here without messing something up too bad. Let's see. Okay, so last night in Revelation 13, talking about the infrastructures and stuff, and it reminded me of the seven heads. Reminded me of the way that the U.S. military breaks things down. So when you count it out, you have Northcom, Southcom. That's 1, 2, UCOM 3, CENTCOM 4, AFRICOM 5, Indo-Pacific 6, and let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and then you get to Space Command. because that's something that just recently happened. That's the new domain here. And then you have the functional areas
Yep.
of the kingdom. Now, I had thought maybe perhaps the beast itself is some type of architecture. Maybe it's a digital architecture. Maybe it's some kind of it's kind of like Microsoft Windows, how everything has to operate on Windows, right?
Yep.
For a long time they held the monopoly on everything, and it was that's how Bill Gates was able to amass so much of his money, was the propriety in the rights and of controlling this software that every computer had to have. Well, we don't know what it is yet. I mean, it could be that there's some type of quantum hybrid computer married with some type of groundbreaking artificial intelligence, and it's able to take all of the systems together and efficiently run them in a way that no human agency could do it, just simply because it's 24/7. It's constantly, every second of the day, it's doing 20, 30, 40,000 different millions of computations every second. We just don't have that kind of bandwidth. But what if the heads were the regional areas? The horns were either individual leaders, or they were like companies or countries, and then the crowns vice versa. You could have to reverse those or whatever. But the thing is, with the functional areas, you would have the land areas married up, but then you would have the functional areas at the bottom, and it could be these could be czars that run these kind of things. And I was just throwing out ideas last night. I mean, it was really kind of like, none of us really 100% know. But there is the UFM, who to me is a very interesting organization, that it is made up of both the EU and then the nations surrounding the Mediterranean. This is the one that Nicolas Sarkozy back in 2005 spearheaded, or actually he spearheaded it back in the 90s with the Barcelona process. But then he was the champion in the early 2000s once he was prime minister. And it's one of the only multinational organization or transnational organizations that includes Israel along with a bunch of Arab states. And their whole purpose is infrastructure. All they've been focusing on for the last, I didn't even know they were still in operation. I had to look it up, but they're still plugging away at infrastructure for basically the old Roman Empire, bringing in clean water, desalinization, setting up energy, all the logistical things that if you were going to make a major power player, you would have to have these things in place. And so they get zero news, zero fanfare. Most people that were even aware of them weren't sure that they still were in operation. All of that, it's just crazy to me that there is this organization is here. It never gets talked about. I could totally see this as a little horn that just comes out of nowhere, like, we've been here this whole time, Well, yeah, of course we can fix these problems. We've been doing that for the last 30 years. And some unnamed bureaucrat that's the deputy to the assistant of whatever, agriculture, he may be the Antichrist. We don't know. Or it could be Jared Kushner. It could be Elon Musk. Honestly, I know those guys weren't born out of the old geographic areas, but if America is going to be considered part of Rome or an extension of Rome, then who knows? I guess it just depends on how you see it.
Right. So whatever the relationship is that we're going to see, it's going to involve a nation with a head over it who's going to dominate some other nations and heads over it. The difficulty that comes in is when we see these 10 toes. There's 10 people that are given power as kings. Historically, I think people have tended to think it's 10 literal kings or 10 literal heads of state, and they're just going to share power in this dictatorship with the Antichrist. But I'm inclined more and more in the direction of that we may see people who are oligarchs or technocrats in that sense, who are given power. And it could well divide the world up into regions. And this one that you just presented could be one of the regions, but it could be broken up in other ways. I mean, the UN has had its formula for breaking up the world into 10 pieces. And there's been several other organizations that have broke the world up in similar but slightly different ways. Obviously, something like this is going to come to pass. That's the only way you can dominate the world, is to break it up into governable regions. And the Antichrist is going to dominate the world. And the heart of this Antichrist domination is going to be probably the strength of Europe and whatever nations are aligned with them. But it is a fascinating subject to speculate on how it might come to pass. It could go in directions that we never anticipated when it develops. I mean, the fourth beast is unique from all those that have preceded it.
Yeah. Let me share this with you guys. I made this. I don't even know when I made this.
One other thing I would point out too is that because we're going to have a 7 and a 10 in the last days, you can expect to see this emulated all over the place. We see 7-year programs. Why do we see 7-year programs? Because they're all emulating the final 7-year program. Why do we see 7 and 10 all over the place? Because it's emulating what's going to happen in the final version. So we can expect to see 7s and 10s everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because you've got multiple different organizations and agencies, both within the United States and without the United States, that have tried to stop the Trump movement, have tried to stop him for the last 9 years. And now that it's become the dominant thing, and it looks like it's going to upend the deep state, and it's also going to upend all these international treaties and these international things that the Democrats have bound the United States to. I'm curious from your perspective what that does for the Agenda 2030, the whole push to get everything done or in place by 2030. Now that's been derailed by 4 years, right? At a minimum. And it seems like the only thing that there is left to do is going to be some type of economic crisis that will have to bring everybody under some type of digital system in order for them to continue to function. So let's just put it this way. Let's say an economic crisis happened in the end of January. So right after the inauguration, the Fed Reserve, Jerome Powell, comes out, says we have to jack up rates because of blah, blah, blah. And then that has this kind of effect on the world or the United States, which has effect on all these other things. And they're going to try and force Trump into this crisis to where he has no other ways to turn left or right but to accept a new digital system. That seems to me pretty obvious. Like that's really the only option they have left other than a World War III scenario. But you've already had Putin reach out and say, "Hey, I want to work toward peace." Hamas has said they want to end the war. Houthis declared a ceasefire. On and on and on. I mean, we see that the effect of Trump now is more of a stabilizing force around the world because the leaders have worked with him in the past, and now they are going to be working with him again. He has friendships with a lot of the major leaders, like Prime Minister Modi of India, Benjamin Netanyahu, who he's been friends with for decades and decades, and then other European leaders and stuff have reached out to him. So the big scare right now is the fate of NATO, the fate of all these treaties that we've been under or put ourselves under with Biden and Obama, and then the overall fragility of the economic conditions around the world. Because the United States is not the only one that's up to their eyeballs in debt. Everybody is in debt up into their eyeballs. Europe is every single individual nation, as well as the EU. Most of the African nations. The only nations that are doing relatively well is like Russia and in Israel, believe it or not. And so I hear what you're saying with the 7-year thing. I think where I said that we may tap the brakes on the globalism side, but on the prophetic side, I see Trump really. I think he told Netanyahu to go ahead and finish up operations, do whatever they had to do to finish up. And then if Hamas hands over the remaining hostages that are alive, that may help assuage some ongoing congruence with operations there. And then I don't know where they are with Hezbollah. Hezbollah seems like it's at the breaking point already. But could it be that the Abraham Accords might fall into that category of a 7-year or 10-year kind of agreement? I'm not saying that it's the Daniel 927. I'm just saying, would that perk your ears up if you heard them float something like 7 years for the Abraham Accords to bring in Saudi Arabia or to bring in, whoever? Let's say that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, let's just say his father passes in the next 6 months or whatever, and he says, "Yeah, we're in on the Abraham Accords." To me, like if they came out with a 7-year thing, if they said 7 years specifically, that would perk my ears up because I'd be like, "Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if that's it, but it sure seems kind of like it would be." But then again, you and I and every other prophecy expert, I think we have a good track record on the general trend of things, but we drill into the specifics. Like, I don't remember anybody talking about Charlie Oscar Victor 1 Delta before it happened, just the impact of the whole world shutting down. And maybe people did. I talked about it very briefly only because I was in the Army medical side, and we just talked about that stuff all the time anyways. I mean, that was in our area of concern and stuff that we dealt with. But I personally didn't come out and say, yeah, I think this is going to happen this year and it's going to be calamitous and the whole world's going to, like, I didn't even see that coming. And there's a lot of prophecy guys that, like you just mentioned, that said that, hey, we're, and not just prophecy guys. I mean, there's been economic experts and others that have said that the U.S. is destined for collapse. And now we have what seems to be this turnaround. I don't know. Things are kind of paradoxical at the moment, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
the things we thought were for sure going to happen didn't, and then they turned out this other way.
Yeah. Well, things have actually turned out the way that I had anticipated. That doesn't mean that what I anticipate from here in the future is going to be right. That just doesn't work that way. But I have anticipated that it would happen this way. A couple of years ago, when it looked like Trump was done politically permanently, and people were commenting on their social media accounts that Trump was forever done politically, and I responded to a few of them and said, I don't think he is. The guy is harder to catch than a greased pig. And so I suspected that he would somehow come out of this more or less unscathed and come out on top. I couldn't say for sure that he would, because I'm not a prophet and I don't have a prophetic word from the Lord, but just using long-term trends and just some basic principles, this is where it looked like it was going to me. Now, what's interesting is what's going to happen over the next 4 years. You mentioned that the stuff that's involved with the project, the 2030 and stuff. Are we still aiming for that? Is this still a real thing? Or has this been sidetracked for 4 years? Well, personally, I think it's still a real thing. I think it's still going to go forwards because we have a different version of the New World Order, or at least a wannabe different version of the New World Order calling shots right now. Adjustments are going to have to be made. It might be that as we go into the final versions of where this is going, some of the points are going to be intact, and some of the points, like this man-caused global warming, are going to be adjusted. But it's still going to go forwards. I don't think that thing is going to stop. Now, when it comes to America and what's going to happen the next 4 years, I suspect the American economy is going to have an amazing rebound. I don't think it's going to die or self-destruct. I don't think we're going to get nuked by the Russians or the Chinese. I don't think our economic system is going to collapse. I've long contended that I think it would be basically stupidity to collapse the American economy just for the sake of a global new world order. The best way to handle the situation is to come in secretly with an inner fifth column or with the Trojan horse and take over the American economy and take over the American military. And that's what I think is in play. And that the globalists are going to realize you can't stop America, so let's rope America. And we'll see what happens. I mean, because obviously there isn't really much of a middle play here. I mean, either America is broken so she doesn't force her way in the New World Order or the global order, or she's going to dominate it. It's hard to think of America as just being a humble servant and gladly serving Russia and China and Europe.
Yeah, I kind of I mean, I look at the well, first of all, I do the year in reviews. I've done it since I started writing back in 2011. And I take the year that's coming up and I do a review what I think is going to happen that year. So I do a little bit about the year that had just passed, and then I really focus on the year that's coming. And my track record for predictions is about 40%. It's not very good. But the one couple of things that I've been right on, and people feel free to fact check me. I've got my old articles up in PDF form by year. I did see him winning in 2016, and I didn't know hardly anything about Trump. I watched that first Republican primary, and I thought that guy's going to win because he's saying exactly what everybody's thinking, but nobody wants to say out loud.
Yep.
The border. Back then, nobody was talking about the border. That was still kind of taboo to talk about it, and or putting a wall up or whatever. And so I predicted that he would win that year, I doubled down in September when I don't know if it was Stormy Daniels or some kind of scandal broke out that they dumped on him right before the election, and I still thought that he was going to win. And I thought in 2020, I said, with the exception that unless there's cheating, unless there's cheating involved in ballot stuffing or whatever. So then this time around feels very much like 2016 to me. And my thoughts are is that things are going to go back to relatively normal. Prices are going to be good. He's going to drop the energy prices, which will cause everything else to drop. And then people are going to go back to kind of normal. Like
Yep.
they're going to forget about the last 4 years, like when we have very short memories. And I think a lot of people are going to kick their feet up thinking, oh, we got this for another 4 years. And then bam, that's when somewhere in the middle of the last Trump administration, he is going to be, that's to me when I think the rapture will happen. It'll catch the world. It'll especially catch most of the church off guard because they will not be anticipating. First of all, they're not expecting the rapture to begin with.
Yep.
If they're NAR, A-mill, post-mill, pre-wrath, post-trib, all the thousands of other different kinds of positions out there. Most people are not going to see it coming, but even the people that do kind of anticipate a rapture aren't sure when it's going to happen. The good times are going to be flowing, and I think that's when it happens. And our collapse is not going to be like what T.S. Eliot said, that it's going to go out with a whimper. I think to whom much is required or given, much is required, right? I think that
Yep.
our collapse is going to be calamitous. And now the United States will still be here. The cities will largely, the structure, et cetera. We're not going to disappear from the map, but the form of government that we have now will collapse. And that's where it gets rolled up into the final world system or whatever. And I think the final system is going to be some type of imperial fascism of some flavor. And, you got to think about it this way. If you're Satan, you're not omniscient, first of all, but you've been around for a long time. You've seen a thing or two, right? And if you're looking at the vibe or the zeitgeist today and you're seeing these Trump rallies where there's 80,000 or 100,000 people, I don't know how many people fit inside Madison Square Garden. That thing's packed out and you still have another 100,000 or so outside waiting to get in. And that's kind of like that everywhere he goes, he maxes it out. And he's got I mean, when he walks into a G20 meeting, everybody is trying to talk to him or be positioned next to him or whatever. And you got a guy like Justin Trudeau who nobody wants to talk to. They won't even look at him. They just like turn their back and, ignore him. Uh, if you're Satan and you're looking at the personal dynamics and the charisma and the ability to sway populations, I mean, you have to go with Trump rather than a Harris or Biden or somebody, So he's finding a way now to co-opt this movement to his own ends. Because I don't see the Antichrist being this like limp-wristed, woke, progressive kind of dude. I think he's going to be very charismatic, and he'll be very much like somebody. He'll be like a Trump type figure. I'm not saying Trump is. I'm just saying it'll be somebody like that.
Yep.
That no matter where he goes, is going to command. If he wants to hold a rally right today with 1 hour notice, he's still going to pack that place out with tens of thousands of people. And that's how I feel like the Antichrist is going to have that kind of charisma. We don't know who that is yet. We don't know how that flows. But to me, Satan has got to be taking these things into account. So why would he? He's using it's like the Hegelian dialectic. He's using the progressive agenda and just taking and ramming it as far left as he can take it, because he knows people are going to react against that. And he's a master study of human nature. He knows we're going to push back against that. And whatever we come back to, we're still, if you're not a believer, you're still just as doomed if you were a fiscal, national security conservative, just as doomed as you would be if you had blue and purple hair and piercings, every part of your body, and your biggest concern in the world is whether or not you can kill your baby. Both of those are still going to the same destination. Where is he going to get the most bang for his buck is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
And I think that's through the nationalist populist movement, not outright globalism, because nobody likes globalism. So if you have to split the difference between nationalism and globalism, what do you get? You get regionalism, and I think people will gravitate towards that. And then that regions will then, think about it this way too. If you're Satan and you're trying to bring the world under one system, is it easier to bring 193 separate sovereign nations together, or is it easier to bring 7 or 10 regions or whatever the case is? And to me, it's much easier to bring the 7 regions in, or 10 regions, than 193 separate individual nations. So I do think that the globalism is going to continue, but it's going to come under the guise of regionalism, that ultimately Satan will be able to co-opt into this one system by the mark of the beast technology or the currency, whatever that ends up looking like. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that thought of incrementalism is really important, because a car doesn't go from 0 to 60 in 1 second. It takes a while to accelerate. A Lamborghini might do it in 4 seconds, and a Corvette might do it in 5.5. But my little car will barely accelerate to 60 in 10 seconds. But it is incrementalism. Things happen a piece at a time. And I think you're right. I think that you're going to have strong nations that are then going to focus on regionalization. We're already seeing this. Russia's got nations gathering around her. China has nations gathering around her. And I think what we're going to see is a strong nationalization coming around America and her immediate allies, around Europe and their immediate allies. This will be networked a little bit. But once the rapture happens and the UFO disclosure, the alien disclosure happens, all bets are off. You have just put a dynamic into play that is going to be the strongest impetus for one world government than we've ever had. And it's also going to be a very strong impetus for one world religion, because you're going to see people departing from traditional historic religion, especially the traditional view that there's a single God in heaven who created all things, moving away from that and embracing this atheistic version of creators, that this planet was seeded by aliens from another alien race and now they're here to help us out. That'll be the collapse of religion, and this will be a vacuum that will suck all the nations in, suck all the religions in. So, but this incrementalization prior to is going to set the stage for that, so that when that happens, it's all ready to come together.
Yeah, I can easily see the rapture happening, and then immediately thereafter the sky getting littered with UFOs or strange things going on, and then shortly after that you have the arrival of the ascended masters, or somebody shows up that is able to do supernatural signs and wonders. And you're right, if you didn't know your Bible or you didn't know what was going to happen, you would believe the great delusion because this guy has supernatural powers, and we've been groomed for the last 30, 40 years with superhero movies, comic books, pop culture. All of that stuff has been gearing us towards uh I think the alien seed theory is more or less the last 20, 30 years have, or really about 20 years, has gained popularity,
Yep.
and or at least people know about it more now than they did then. But I think if an ascended master shows up and points somebody out and says, or clears some stuff up or helps push some type of technology forward in a way that revolutionizes how mankind lives on the earth, I think that that would effectively be the death knell for any religion that's remaining on the earth. Now, what that does leave is it leaves people who were heard about the rapture, have some kind of knowledge of it prior to, and like my friends that are not believers that I talk about this stuff with all the time, they would know. People that find Left Behind kits, maybe the two witnesses are involved in this, the 144,000 are here. So they're going to find out about this, that this was already foretold, and not to trust these guys. But I think the overwhelming majority of people are going to think they're just going to be blown away by it. It'll be unprecedented, just like the rapture will be unprecedented, and it will be of biblical proportions. This term that gets thrown around quite a bit these days, or more and more so, right? But when the rapture happens, that will then open the floodgates up back for the supernatural to become the normal, for that stuff to happen back in the world, because the restrainer is no longer restraining that here on the earth. I had a question in regard to Sir Pierce Seville is collecting all the questions here, but one of those kind of falls along those same lines. Let's see. Uh, the strong delusion. What do you think the strong delusion will be? I don't know. I think it's going to be with these ascended masters, or somebody shows up on right after the rapture. What's your thoughts on the strong delusion?
Well, it's certainly going to involve a denial of the Almighty, and an insistence on atheistic evolution. It very well, and I think it will, but it's a probability, not a certainty, that it's going to involve the aliens and seeding the human race, and that they're here to give us ascended master knowledge and lead us into the new age. And it's all going to fit from all these false philosophies and ideologies, and religions are all going to gel together in this message. And it's going to be an antithesis then between the Christ of the Bible and the Antichrist of this new world order. And so, that's definitely going in the right direction for the great delusion. It's going to be a fundamental denial of real biblical creation and real biblical redemption.
Think about it this way. So, if there's only one true belief system, and that's the biblical narrative for creation, the incarnation, everything within our Bible is the truth, and it's reality. It's not just truth, it's reality as well. If every other belief system then has its origins with Satan.
That's
I don't
right.
care if it's Shintoism, Taoism, Islam, whatever. All of those other systems, belief systems, have their origin with Satan. So I think one of the things that one of these ascended masters could do when he shows up is he's going to synchronize all of the different belief systems, explaining perfectly to them how they all fit together, all the because every one of these belief systems has their own mysteries and has their own things that you have to aspire to learn, get deeper into the knowledge of Shintoism or Hinduism, and you have to have studied for 40 years, and all of those things have their own esoteric, secrets that is unique to their faiths. And this guy's going to be able to talk about all of them equally and then tie them all in together and put them all together in a package with a nice little bow and say, look, see, we planted you here and we separated you by blah blah blah, and we gave you these ideas so that you guys wouldn't come together too early, or whatever the explanation is. They're going to be able to answer those questions that the wisest gurus and imams and et cetera have been looking for forever and ever. And these guys are just going to explain it to them like it's a matter of fact, and be able to demonstrate it supernaturally. And that, I think, that cements it for most people. And again, the people that don't buy into it right off the, wholeheartedly is going to be the Jews, the people that have had exposure to the rapture before. The certain faith systems will still be holding out, I guess. But Jesus said that he told his disciples, he goes, I tell you these things ahead of time, so when they happen, you'll believe it. And I think that principle still applies when we talk about the rapture to our friends, and why it's so important to talk about these things, because there is still a chance for redemption. If they miss it going up, there's still a chance that the fact that it happens and they knew about it beforehand, that's going to cement it in their minds. Like, hey, my friend Lee was talking about this, and I thought he was crazy, but then it happened. There's going to be a little window of time where people are going to, I think that's where this massive revival stems from that we see in this during the time of the seal judgments, with the martyrs. So
Absolutely. I think once the rapture happens, you're going to have a great shaking in America and in the world, and you're going to have a very large percentage of people in some parts of the world get saved, and there'll be people all around the world getting saved. But eventually, the world in general is going to start embracing the explanations of the Great Delusion. What's interesting about this, the Great Delusion is sent by God. A lot of people get confused. They think, well, you got to make a distinction between tribulation and the day of the Lord. And the tribulation isn't judgment, but only the day of the Lord is, or only the time of wrath. But there's some mistaken thinking here, because the tribulation is a great trial of the Lord. And if you look at the connections in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the sending of the great delusion of the Antichrist, this is during the tribulation time. And he is sent, this delusion is sent as a judgment from God to judge those who didn't believe, and give them the ability to bring themselves into certain damnation. He's basically said, if you want to be damned, here you go. Here's the story. Here's what you need to believe. And he just gives it to them. This is a judgment. It's also interesting that in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, in verse 3, we read that let no man deceive you. That day is not here unless the apostasy come first and the man of sin be revealed. And what day is that? It's the day of the Lord. So what it's saying is the whole time of the Antichrist is the day of the Lord. Once we understand this, then we realize that the entire 70th week is tribulation of man upon man. The entire 70th week is tribulation of the devil upon man. And the entire 70th week is tribulation of God upon man. And the entire 70th week is wrath upon man. It's the whole thing is covered by all four. We don't need to make artificial distinctions between them.
Yeah. And somebody had asked me last night about the restrainer. Could the restrainer be the devil? And I thought that doesn't make any sense. Why would the restrainer if the devil was the restrainer, why would he restrain his own efforts to bring about? He's only got one shot at this. He's only got one shot at trying to thwart Bible prophecy, trying to destroy the Jews, trying to do anything that he can to avoid the lake of fire as his ultimate destination. He's not coming at this with his C team. He's going to come at this with his A team. That's why I don't think it's going to be a guy like Trump, who's 78, or Charles, who's 81, or anybody in the the septuagenarian range on above. I think it's going to be a younger man, 40s, 50s, maybe at the most, that's got the energy, the drive, and this guy's going to be working harder than Trump worked on his campaign. This guy is going to be 24/7 because he's only got this small window of time to make all this stuff happen. And he's got to have the most on top of what God's already going to do, right? So God's going to allow this strong delusion to happen. We see in Revelation 13:7 that God gives the Antichrist the authority to go out and martyr these tribulation saints, and they're going to be slaughtered in droves. And to a point that John in Revelation 7, he is not the whoever's showing him who these people are, and he says you can't even count them. There wasn't a number big enough for them or whatever. But then you go to the next chapter and it talks about the 200 million horsemen. He goes, I heard that number, but then they couldn't number the number of martyrs that are under there, or before the throne in Revelation 7. So to me, it's a number bigger than that. How much bigger, I don't know, but it's going to be a big number. And I think I think that's a combination of things. That's the 144,000. That's the two witnesses. That's the folks that had been exposed to it prior to the rapture now were early converts and then are converting other people before they're killed. But it's interesting to me how these two witnesses will have supernatural capabilities, because if it were only the two witnesses that had the supernatural capabilities, I think that would be the strongest counter to the strong delusion. So that tells me that these other that we see in Revelation 13, the false prophet, these other guys are going to have supernatural abilities. Even if they're lying signs and wonders, they're going to deceive the people to think that they have this power. People are going to believe it. And so, hey, here's a question. Let's see. I was going to just say about this year. Was there anything this year that surprised you that you thought would happen but didn't? I mean, aside from the rapture.
Let's see, something that I thought was going to happen or didn't happen. Nothing up, obviously nothing that really stands out as something that was a shocker to me. A mild shock would be how the sweeping victory for the Republican Party in the election. That was a mild shock to me. I suspected all along that Trump would win. I did not suspect it would be approaching landslide in the electoral vote. Didn't suspect it would be a landslide with the popular vote. So that was a pleasant surprise. I think I'd long understood that the Republican Party was shifting to the left and becoming more of a centrist independent position. And I've long believed that the Republican Party, if it was going to gain and retain dominance, had to start going soft on the chief moral issues of the day and maintain her strength on a more centrist position with the military, the economy, the borders, Middle East policy, European policy, Russian policy, China and Taiwan policies. And that's exactly what Trump has done. I'm surprised that he did as well at that as he did. And I'm surprised that the party has now broadened out as broad as it has. It'll be interesting to see if this process continues, because if it does, the Republican Party of the last 30 years is history, and the new Republican Party is, for all practical purposes, the independents and the centrists. That may not be a bad thing for America from a purely political perspective, but from a moral perspective, it's going to be a costly endeavor.
Yeah, I tell you, I was surprised. I thought the Israelis would have had cleaned up or would have finished up their operations by like May. I mean, I really thought they would have already been done with Hamas. In terms of still having to fight, insurgents or pockets of insurgents, I thought that would have already been cleared up. I'm surprised at they're taking out of Nasrallah. Most military experts would have seen an operation like that and thought, okay, well, this is going to be years in the making, And I'm surprised that obviously the assassination. I wasn't surprised at the assassination attempt. I'm surprised how it turned out, like how it, him turning his head and just all of the things surrounding that. And then, yeah, I'm surprised with the election. I thought he was going to win big. When I did a podcast with Pablo about 8 days prior, and I showed my map. Because you can go on that 270 to win. I think that's the name of the website. You can go on there and you
Yep.
can play around with the map models and stuff. And so I said, here's my prediction. And it was red. It was the same with the exception of Minnesota and all the blue states. I had is the lightest blue I can make them. Like the left coast, I had them all very, very light blue. East Coast, light blue, with the exception of like Vermont or something, or whatever the state is that's super like liberal. And when you look at the maps, when you look at the county maps, I mean, California is very red. Most of the state is red. You just got those urban areas that dominate
Yep.
with the population. Um, Same thing with Oregon and Washington. You've got large swaths of those areas that are pretty conservative, but it's the major urban areas in those states that really just ruin it for everybody. So I saw a sweep. I was fairly confident going in. I did expect there to be challenges, though. I did not expect her to concede the next day. I did not expect for the decision desk to make the calls as early as they did. I thought things were going to be dragged out too, but yeah, the whole Nasrallah thing, the pagers,
Yeah, the pagers, that one was a surprise. I didn't see that one coming.
and that just blew me away. Like there were so many things that happened this year that were just like, and so it's been it's been a very crazy year, looking back, just going back to January and everything coming forward. Even my own personal life, with Ella and the car accident and all that stuff that was happening this summer. And so I think 2025, as crazy as this year has been, I think it's going to get even crazier next year, and it's going to keep getting crazier. And that's why I say that on one hand, the globalist agenda was throttled a little bit now, and that'll be throttled until the next major crisis kind of forces hands to do globalist solutions. But on the prophetic side, I saw that ramping up and going, way ahead. And I think it may have something. I don't know if it's going to have something to do with the third temple, or maybe one of these missiles that's aimed at Israel accidentally knocks the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock out or destroys it somehow. And Trump may be instrumental in helping them or securing their rights to rebuild a third temple or something to that effect. Maybe Jared Kushner, maybe that's tied up in the Abrahamic Accords. We don't know. I do see a revival of the Abraham Accords, so that's something I do anticipate seeing gaining traction as we move forward. Because I think that now that they've got the mandate, I think they're going to push hard on this. And depending on what happens with Hezbollah, Hamas is pretty much done. There's small pocket, we call them squirters. There's small squirter pockets here and there, but I think if they can get their hostages back, or whoever of the hostages are still alive, I think that will basically end the conflict portion of it, and then they'll go to the restructuring and the post-war management of the Gaza Strip, which may be some type of a joint force between the United States and Israel. I don't think that anybody trusts the United Nations anymore to secure
Nope.
anything. Like I think we know that's a waste of time. So Gaza Strip, and then the southern portion of Lebanon, they may station U.S. forces on both of those in conjunction with a IDF force, and maybe some type of a third party like an Arab, Jordanians or Saudis or somebody else may join that to give it some kind of a balance from the Arab world's perspective. But I think the Abraham Accords will be big going into 2025. I think that'll gain traction again. And I would not be surprised if Mohammed bin Salman's father passes and he's actually gets the crown during
Yep.
this time period. I see Clarence Thomas retiring once Trump's in office, and then they'll put in a new one, and they're trying to get what's her name, the Hispanic lady on the Supreme Court, Sonia Mayor, what's her name?
Sotomayor?
Sotomayor. Yeah. Uh, she may retire because she's got diabetes, and or she has some medical issue going on with her. So she may step down, and then that would give Trump another Supreme Court. So he will have effectively put in what, 5 of the Supreme Court justices
Yep.
if he gets 2 in this term. Uh, in terms of politically, I mean, he'll have things locked down. In terms of international relations, I think the United Nations will leave the U.S. shores. I think we'll pull out of all this other stuff. Somebody had asked a question too, like, why would he pick Susie Wiles as his chief of staff? Because she was connected to the WEF. And I think, she's been with him since 2016 or maybe a little before that. And she's been very much a Trump loyalist this whole time. I think most political figures at one point of their career or another in the last 30 years have had some kind of connection to the WEF. So simply because they took a class or they attended or they were a part of it a long time ago, I think that's all pre-Trump days. And I don't know how much weight that stuff holds because MAGA has made such a divide amongst not just Republicans, but the conservative party away from the Democrats, from the establishment party, the establishment politicians, and all of that stuff. So I don't see her as a WEF loyalist. I see her as a Trump loyalist. And here's something that Dinesh D'Souza said the other day that I thought was fascinating. He was on there with Tom Hughes and Tim Thompson, I guess is the name, Pastor Tim Thompson. And Dinesh had talked to Trump because he had done this documentary called Vindicating Trump. And he had asked Trump, he said, it's the biggest proof that January 6th wasn't an insurrection. He goes, because if you had asked them people to show up and actually do an insurrection, they would have. You would have had hundreds of thousands of people show up with weapons, and it would have been a violent takeover of the government or the system there. But they didn't. They didn't show up with weapons. They showed up peacefully, and you had some people that were agitated, and we know that there was instigators in the crowd from the federal side, and they were, leading people in and stuff. So there was stuff that had happened, but Dinesh made the point to say that if you had called for one, you're that kind of political icon, that cultural icon. You're once in a century type of political figure. And there won't be another guy like you for another 20, 30 years from his estimation, right? Like, I mean, guys like him don't come along very often, but if he wanted to rally the troops, he absolutely could have rallied the troops in a very effective way. So he's got that mandate going into this. And so I've got to imagine the deep state, big pharma, big food, all these guys are freaking out, trying to figure out what their game plan is because they thought they had it all locked up back in July 13th. They thought that was a done deal. And they had their woman in place. They had Nikki Haley ready to go. So now that all that stuff's fallen through, I can't help but think that God is specifically putting Trump in here for this particular time for a particular reason, just like he's done that with Nebuchadnezzar. He did that with Cyrus. He did that with whoever, the Artaxerxes, who was it with Esther when Esther was in Persia? Was it Artaxerxes?
Yep.
Artaxerxes, Pontius Pilate. You think about all the major figures in history that have played some type of role in putting the world where we are today. It's according to God's timeline. Charlemagne, I mean, you can go on and on and on. And I don't think Trump is any different in that regard. God has him in this time and place. And if he had lost and Harris was in place, then God, as much as we would not have wanted that to happen because we have to live under it, we would not have been happy with the Harris administration, but we would have had to acknowledge that, okay, well, God's sovereign. He wanted her in the position there. It's got some particular reason for it.
That's right.
And I look at a guy like Senator Fetterman in Pennsylvania, the guy that had the tumor, the brain surgery. He had a stroke or something, but he beat out Dr. Oz for that state or the Senate position, the Senate seat. And everybody, I mean, myself included, did not give this guy nothing. Like, we didn't give him 2 ounces of credibility. And yet he's been one of the only Democrats that has consistently stood up with Israel, stood with Israel, and they're supported their right to defend themselves. And like, this guy I don't even know, I don't even think he's Jewish. Like, like how is a guy like that so pro-Israel when 99% of his party is marching the other direction? And so God puts these people in place, right time, right place, and they fill some kind of niche that needs to be filled. And I feel like Trump is the success of America is gonna lull us back into this. We made it. We got another 40 years to go. We don't have to worry. And then sudden destruction happens at the rapture. So I don't know if your thoughts are.
I think we're definitely headed for what looks to be a great revival of America. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we have what superficially appears to be a great revival of religion here in America, in which there will be some real revival in real Bible believing circles, not a doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
But behind all this juggernaut of the New World Order will still be moving behind the scenes going forwards. They've bounced back and forth between Republicans and Democrats many, many times in America in the last few decades. And it doesn't matter who was in power, they used them to secure legislation that they wanted, policy directions that they wanted. And this is the same thing again now. So it really doesn't matter whether we think Trump is fully independent of the New World Order or whether he's a closet subservient to the New World Order, or whether the global cabal is decided they're going to run with the centrists instead of the leftists. It doesn't really matter. If we have that figured out, we can rest assured that going forwards here is going to present some spiritual challenges for discernment for real believers here in America.
Yeah. I have a question here. It says, does the last Trump have any relevance or only a meaning relating to the trumpet judgments? Something seems to be something like an Easter egg only God would put in scripture for us today. What are your thoughts on that? The last Trump in regard to the trumpet judgments.
Yeah, well, my 2 thoughts here that I have. One is that we don't want to be confusing the judgment trumpets that start after the 70th week has started with the trumpet that gathers the believers. There's for the rapture of the church. There'd be no reason to confuse those. We have a clear church program that's going to be followed by the last 7 years of the Jewish program. If you've got two distinct redemption programs under the new covenant, then you're going to have 2 distinct gatherings. You're going to have 2 distinct last trumpets. You're going to have 2 different comings of the Messiah. There's really only one literal second coming, but the rapture is the apontesis of the parousia. In other words, it's the church coming out to meet the coming Messiah and then later on returning with him. So they're distinct events. So you have a distinct gathering, a distinct coming, and distinct last trumpets. Once if we go down that path, then there really isn't any great mystery about it. It becomes a mystery if we confuse those 2 things.
Yeah, I've talked about on mine. This is something unique to me. I don't know if anybody else thinks this way, but I think the fact that the King James Bible is the most popular English version translation that we've had in our world for the last 400 plus years. The fact that the translator chose to put the last trump in 1 Corinthians 15:52, whereas most other translations just says trumpet. I don't know. To me, regardless of whether it says trump or trumpet, the fact that it says the last one, to me, indicates there has to be a first one. And the first one
go ahead.
has, in my estimation, is in Exodus 19, where God gathers the nation of Israel together at Mount Sinai, the foot of Mount Sinai, all together for the first time as a nation. And then Moses goes up, God comes down, Moses goes up. But that trumpet blast that happens, man, everybody's like freaking out. It's like shaking the ground, shaking them. They're freaking out. The mountain is smoking and fiery. And in the same context, the last trumpet gathers believers, Christians from the last 2,000 years together. And instead of Moses going up, we all go up together. We're one body collectively, right? We go up, the Lord comes down, meets us in the air, we go up. And so I see that correlation from that first trumpet to the last trumpet as both being the same type of things. Like they're both gatherings. First, it's for the nation of Israel. Then the second time, it's for all of the believers for the last 2,000 years, from that first Pentecost until
So
whenever
you're
the
not
rapture
making a
happened.
distinction between the gathering of the Jewish believers and the gathering of the Gentile believers? I'm a little bit confused.
No, just I'm looking at the context. So what was the
Okay.
context of Exodus 19? What was happening? What was that trumpet blast in correlation to?
Okay,
It
gotcha.
wasn't a gathering. It wasn't like the silver trumpets you see in Leviticus for war, for the assembling and stuff. Although there could be some type of correlation there. And it's not the trumpet judgments, and it's not the Feast of Trumpets. I think that the first trumpet of God, we see the event happening there at Mount Sinai, where the nation of Israel gathers at the foot of Mount Sinai all together for the first time. And then Moses goes up. The Lord comes down, God comes down. Moses goes up to the top of the mountain. The Lord comes to the top of the mountain. And in the church, in the rapture, that last trump is that another divine trumpet. It's another trumpet coming out of heaven. Now, this time, all the Christians of all the ages in the last 2,000 years, Jew and Gentile alike, whoever is a believer, the dead in Christ rise first, and then those of us alive, we all meet together we meet the Lord. We all go up together and we meet the Lord in the air, and then we all go together back with him. So in terms of apples for apples, I think they're the same type of they match in context. You know what I mean? The seventh trumpet judgment doesn't make any sense with the rapture. The Feast of Trumpets, the last trumpet judgment, doesn't make any sense in relation to a rapture. The context isn't there or the correlation isn't there, in my opinion, in that way. But
Well, one other thing that
yeah,
should be borne into consideration too, people look at the word eschatos and they think it has to be the last in a series, but that's only one of the three most common ways that the word was used. It was regularly used for, like, it be the end of a ship. There's not a series of ends on the ship. There's just the end of the ship. There's the front end and the back end. It was used for a border, like you could call a river the end of Israel. So it didn't have the sense of the last in a series. It was just the final or the end. And it was used that way regularly in Greek. It was also used if someone was in extreme circumstances. They would use eschatos, whether it's extreme fear or extreme danger or extreme poverty. So once we start entering into that, then we have to ask the question, okay, is this imply a series of trumpets in which the rapture trumpet is the last one, which is a possibility? Or is it simply a trumpet that marks the end of the age, which is also a possibility?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I hold some of these things loosely because we just don't know how it's going to happen until it happens. We can have our theories and a hypothesis and things like that on a lot of these issues that are yet to have happened. They're still future to us, so we know the general outline. We don't have all the detailed narrative of how exactly these things are going to be fleshed out, so to speak. David Jack asked, do the 10 toes of the leaders are they from the old Roman Empire, or will they be leaders of the global regions, since they are part of the feet, and the feet were part of the legs, and the legs were part of Rome? So do those 10 leaders come from out of the old Roman Empire, or could they come out from, if the whole system is Roman?
Well, that's an interesting question. Here's the difficulty for me. Obviously, the Roman Empire is going to dominate the world. Now, how that domination comes about is another question. And or you're going to have these 10 toes located in a particular area, that they all come out of Europe, and then they're assigned positions over the world, or they're going to be a little bit more lax once the world's conquered. And then we also have the question of, how is this world going to be conquered? Are we going to conquer it in spite of the, and I say we, I mean, I'm believing that America is part of the New World Order, along with Europe and the Middle East and the Saudi Arabia unity. I think these will all be together. That'd be a lot of economic wealth and a lot of military might. But is this conglomeration going to conquer the world through the UN, or conquer it in spite of the UN? Or it's going to be interesting to see how this comes to pass, because somehow, if it's simply the UN and they dominate the world, in my mind, that loses the coloring, the connection of the Roman Empire. If the world just gets divided into 10 pieces, in and of itself, that seems to lose the connection with the Roman Empire and the coloring of the Roman Empire. So somehow you have to have the Roman Empire dominating and conquering the world. Yeah. And what's interesting about this is, I could see this happening if you're in a place where, in very short order, you have China has an economic collapse that's, compares to the great crash in 1929. If we have the rapture, and then we have the Ezekiel 38 and 39 situation, so that Russia and her allies in fundamentalist Islam, they're out of the picture. So China's half out of the picture from economic collapse. Russia and the Islamic fundamentalists, they're out of the picture. Now there's not a lot of potential power players left. This Roman Empire steps into this vacuum. There really is nobody to challenge her. And so when the world challenges come up, you have the potential alien situation. There's difficulties around the world. When they step up, there's really nobody to challenge them. And I think that's ultimately how they're going to take control of the world.
Yeah, I mean, the Romans had a practice of taking their leaders and setting them, putting them in charge of regional areas, like Pontius Pilate, the various generals that were trying to conquer Britain back then, and Germania and all the. So they would put their own people in place there. They didn't care what the people did, so long as they paid taxes and they paid tribute to Caesar, and they offered up their sons every once in a while to help field the armies. But for the most part, those people didn't have to change their religions. They didn't have to relocate or whatever. They stayed there, but they were now under the auspices of the Pax Romana. So yeah, I mean, it could be that after everything is said and done, the U.S. has collapsed, Russia, China are bad shape, and there's really no other power player in the area except for Europe. And they're, if it is individuals, then these 10 kings could come from Europe, some form or fashion, and they're put out there in charge of the regions. And I guess it also depends, if you look at the legs of iron, if you're looking at the legs of iron as the evolution of time from 27 BC, or whenever you want to start it, all the way down through not just the collapse of Rome in the 450s, but the western part. But if you went all the way down into the Byzantine, and then from the Byzantine Empire, the European, all of the young lions thereof, the colonial superpowers back in the 15 to 1900s that basically colonized the world.
Yep.
And then, of course, we would be an offshoot of that. So I guess it depends on how the legs and the feet all kind of are, what their manifestation looks like in reality as compared to what it says in the Bible. So that does puts us in the speculation territory when we look at about the toes, or what does it mean, the miry clay with the toes, or they don't cling to one another. And so I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating to look at. I think we can kind of get a glimpse, but we're looking at it through the darkened glass, trying to make sense of the picture. We're watching the picture being pixelated, and it's coming into focus, but we can't quite make it out just yet.
Well, one thing I've been thinking about for decades is that if we're just not looking for any really fine-tuned, cool insight, we're just going to step back, get a little elevation, and then look at a big picture. The one thing that we definitely see, and we've seen it for the last 100 years, where iron and clay do not mix, is the European religion and democracy do not mix with Arab religion and their form of Sharia law, their form of absolutarianism. They just don't mix. When you get those Muslims up in Europe, well, some of them are nice people. A high percentage of them are thugs. And when you bring the Europeans down the Middle East, we're not culturally sensitive necessarily to the way they do things. We try and bring our ways of doing things in, and we're not a good fit amongst them either. We tolerate each other when both sides get to make money. But if that's not a clear game there, then we don't get along very well. So I think there's probably other things we could think of that go down this path, but I think that's one clear one that we can look at and say, okay, yeah, we see a place where iron and clay don't mix. And I think that's a kind of non-mixing principle we look for. And then if it fits in other places, well, it fits in other places too.
Yeah. Question here from Busy for the Lord. Does peace and security refer to Israel alone or the entire world? I think it's the whole world, but I think the phrase from 1 Thessalonians 5, where then when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, I think that is in relation to the entire world.
Yep.
The Daniel 9:27 seems more along the lines of nations surrounding or dealing with Israel. So that seems to be more of a regional type thing. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I've often thought that, as you said, that this is really going to be the perspective of the world. The world maybe is feeling that it's on the doorstep. We finally attained where we're going to have some peace and security, and things are normalizing, things are stabilizing, and we're getting more of the good side of the normal for the last 200 years and less of the bad side of normal for the last 200 years. And they're happy, they're content, they're complacent. And now the rapture happens. And right following after the rapture, whether it's hours or days or weeks later, you have this Gog and Magog thing where that whole army comes together against Israel. It's obliterated by judgment from heaven. It's not obliterated by nuclear weapons from America or nuclear weapons from Israel. And this is going to be disconcerting. And not only does it fall on there, but it's going to be fire from heaven on them that dwell carelessly in the isles and on Magog itself. In other words, a vast portion of Russia. So this will be very, very destructive. And so immediately, once the rapture happens, it just starts following immediately by devastation and judgment on the earth. Just like when Lot left Sodom and then fire fell, so when the church leaves the earth, fire is going to fall.
Yeah. Question: is preterism kingdom now? I don't think they are. Or could they?
Well, they're not identical. Preterism is usually associated with amillennialism, and
Yeah,
kingdom now is
almost.
usually associated with postmillennialism. Now, you might find some similarities between some of their school of thought and their thinking, because there's a lot of similarities between a spiritualized kingdom in amillennialism, where they're free to go in the direction of the slow spread of the gospel across the globe. That they don't necessarily take it the same place to the same degree that postmillennialism does, but they're not opposed to the spread of the gospel throughout the entire world. Many of them actually believe that. Postmillennialism, that is their teaching. That is the gospel commission, is to Christianize the world. Preterism is a form of amillennialism, which believes that all prophecy was full of the second coming, or at least almost all of it was fulfilled in before or at AD 70 or in the immediate area. So not only do they believe that the second coming is fulfilled there, the tribulation prophecies, the Antichrist prophecies, everything like that was fulfilled then. Now the church has entered into a spiritual kingdom age, and there we are. So preterism doesn't usually mix very well with kingdom and dominion thinking, directly speaking, but they certainly would be open to that idea.
Yeah, I see them more along the lines with historicism, where they're trying to fit things into the past.
Yep.
And in their case, preterism, it's all 70 AD and prior.
Yep.
But I do think that when they're looking at future things, that there's a lot of guys that claim to be partial preterists that adhere to a lot of historicist type of examples for Genghis Khan is the rider on the red horse, things like that.
Yep. Yep.
So somebody had asked in the chat, why review 2024 now and not in December or January? I probably, as things are going forward, we probably have to do this twice a year, because so much stuff has happened that, well, I mean, we're not even scratching the surface, and there's a ton of stuff that we haven't even brought up yet. That's part of that is an election year, but I think with Trump back in office, it's going to be incredibly
We're going to see
continually.
things accelerate. I mean, we are going to see the digital currency system accelerated. We are going to see 5G accelerated. We'll see 6G accelerated. We are going to see a lot of things accelerated. Bitcoin and blockchain technology are going to be accelerated. We are going in that direction, for better or for worse.
Yeah, along those lines, Only Believe asked, how will Trump GOP fix the broken banking system that could go belly up and Republicans will get the blame for? So one of the issues that nobody's talking about in either campaign, and you've only got a handful of congressmen and senators even talking about it, is the national debt. I mean, we're at 35 trillion. Most other European nations or civilized nations are in as bad as debt as we are.
Yep.
The way I think that they may approach this is they may try to come up with a digital system that's not central bank controlled, because I don't think Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if between now and 2024 the Federal Reserve doesn't change or become leave the United States and its current structure, and they kick them out and they go somewhere else, because they're just really a cartel of banks, and these banks aren't subject to federal audits. They're not subject to, if the president asked Jerome Powell to step down, he's like, I'm not going to step down. So they're kind of above the president in terms of their own power structure, and I don't think that's going to fly in this next 4 years if we're still here for all that. So I think the solution will be a digital one because the rest of the world is moving in digital currency. Even if the United States says we're not going to the central bank digital currency, the rest of the world is, and they're not going to take our dollars anymore. They're not going to take our bonds and stocks that are backed in US currency, because that's why nobody took the Confederate dollars after the Civil War was over, because there's no legitimacy to it. We'll have the legitimacy, but our currency won't have any legitimacy because there's nothing backing it. And I think we'll have to go to some type of cryptocurrency that is somehow different, and it's going to be sold as being different from the central bank digital currency, but it will still be digital. And after the collapse of our present structure, governmental structure, it'll be an easy switch to change that digital system to what everybody else is using, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Myself, of course, because I'm not looking for the American experiment here to collapse. I'm expecting it to go forth and reach new heights. Not that I think that's a good thing, but I think that's what's going to happen. And I don't foresee us going through economic collapse. I think one of the difficulties people face is they get in their mind that this $35 trillion debt is real debt. And I think this isn't real debt the same way that if I loan you $20, you owe me $20.
Yeah.
It works in a little bit different way. It's working in a fractional banking system. And it's also working in a system where the lenders don't actually expect to get paid back. What you're doing is when you receive money, you owe favors. The only nations that have ever been broken economically in this system are those that have tried to scam those that were trying to scam them. And that's when nations get broken. Or you try and fly your own independent path, and you offend the global cabal who controls the purse strings for the world banks and for the Federal Reserve, for England's equivalent. So really, we're in a colossal tug of war here. America struggled when the markets collapsed in 1929. And that was a great difficulty. We have certain things in play now that I think will prevent that type of a collapse. We're not going to see collapses beyond what we saw in 2000, 2007, and those eras, when we had collapse of the stock market, collapse of the banking system. It looks really painful for a while, and then it recovers, and there was no lasting permanent damage to the economy. And the people say, well, this debt just keeps building and building. Well, yeah, it does. But let me put it this way. If the global cabal wants to break a nation, whether Russia or China or America, and they pulled out all stops, they could do that. That's a mighty big if. Here's another interesting perspective coming from a slightly different angle. What if the global cabal wants America to stay strong and be part of a coalition that includes the oil nations in Europe? Whether America is the head or part of the body or part of the tail here is really a secondary question. But to maintain that economic clout, if that's the case, there's no reason to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Nobody lays more golden eggs than America. And if you want money and power to dominate the world, you're not going to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. And so where I'm going with this phantom debt thing is these Federal Reserves and similar institutions print money that doesn't exist, and they give it to the federal government. And then the federal government can use that money in different ways. And countries like China will loan us money, and then we'll owe them, and we go into debt. If they demand that debt and we tell them to go jump in the lake, it doesn't affect us at all. They're the ones that are hurt. And if you get in this tug of war with the Federal Reserve and the American government takes control of the Federal Reserve, well, then the Federal Reserve's dominance is done. So I'm not too worried about the debt. I suspect that the debt can grow 3 times the size that it is, with no more harm than the fact that inflation goes 3 times the rate that it is in the future. And then everyone just gets paid 2.5 times as much. So our cost of living goes down a little bit and inflation goes up, but there's no monumental damage there. You'd have to come up with something different than merely the size of the debt to break the country.
Yeah, my understanding of the national debt was that we were borrowing against future generations. So, like for instance, if my parents are on Social Security now, they may enjoy it through the duration of their life. But by the time I get to in 10 years or 15 years, I'm able to draw from it. There just won't be any money there.
Yeah,
Is
well,
the way I
Social
understand it.
Security,
And children.
that's definitely an independent issue from the economy in general, and that would be painful. If Social Security goes broke, that would be a tremendous blow to the American economy. But I suspect that when you get a few minds like Elon Musk and whoever Donald Trump's other counselors are, I'm sure they have plans where they're not going to let this thing fail. You'll have to shuffle stuff around. You'll have to take money that you're printing in the Federal Reserve and throwing overseas, and you'll have to take some of that and throw it into the Social Security slush fund, but they'll come up with something to do.
You got prophecy watchers. I don't know who this is. This maybe somebody that controls their.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it could be
They're in the
Bob
house.
Ulrich. It could be Mondo Gonzalez.
I told Bondo if I'm still here in December, because that's only like an hour away, I'm totally crashing that conference in
Oh, yeah,
Branson.
absolutely.
Hey, here's another question. Now I'm gonna there's 2 more questions that I'm gonna do, and then I've got to run.
Okay.
One deals with Islam and the Antichrist, and this one there's 2 questions associated with this one about the iron teeth and the doesn't the mixed imply that Rome is mixed with nations by the end? I just noted last night when you look at Daniel 7, you get the order of the beast. You know, these are the same. The beasts represent the same things that the statue represented in Daniel 2. But the beast, you get the lion, you get the bear, then you get the leopard, and then you get the 4th beast, which is not just given any specific identifying things other than it has iron teeth and it tramples everything and it's ferocious, right? It's terrifying. And then you go to Revelation 13, you get those in reverse.
Yep.
So you get the leopard, the bear, and the lion, or something to that effect. Both of the descriptions of them are given in reverse. So I heard one thing where John is looking back, Daniel was looking forward. I don't know if maybe that's true. I don't know, but maybe it does have something to do. The iron teeth and everything have something to do with the multinational flavor of this final kingdom, beast kingdom. And here's kind of where I went last night with it. I thought that if you look at the successful empires, throughout the history of mankind, you've had empires that rose and fell, rose and fell, rose and fell. What the Romans did that was different was they took the very best of the nations that they conquered from and incorporated into their own system. And that's why they lasted as an empire for 500 plus years. And then if you extend on the Byzantine Empire, And so the United States did very much the same thing. We took the very best of the Greco-Roman classical world in terms of governance, philosophy, uh, politics, the best of the Enlightenment thinkers in regard to capitalism and the wealth of nations, etc. And then we took the best of the Judeo-Christian ethos and applied that as the overarching structure for how we are as a nation, as citizens in the nation, so forth. So I think what this final beast kingdom is also going to take the very best that has made the nations, the successful empires, successful. They take the best of those things, and they're going to be that amalgamation of this final um, system that is incorporated what's made these previous empires successful, and then applying it them as the final iteration of human government. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
And if you look at the beast, as it's mentioned in Daniel 7, it appears to have absorbed some of the features of the previous empires, which seems to imply that when she expands in the last days, she is going to absorb Babylon and Persia, even though historically they were not part of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I'm looking at, let's see. My phone's dying. It's in the process of dying. Does the iron teeth represent Rome devouring the earth?
Absolutely. The scriptures are very clear that she is going to crush and devour, and that you read in Revelation 13 that nobody can resist the beast. So the beast empire is going to not have any challengers, really significant challengers anywhere. She's going to work her will in Europe and in the Middle East and in North Africa, dominate the world, and there won't be any challengers. Well, no significant challengers.
Yeah, yeah. This one asks, does the this is from Alex, could a Muslim attain to political prominence in Israel? I say no, unless that person is like, I don't think the Jews are ever going to worship or follow after a Muslim Messiah. I maybe if that guy is Kurdish and he comes out of the Kurdistan region or has history, because they were also kind of a beleaguered peoples that don't have their own state, and they've been friendly with the Israelis for the last 75 years or whatever, and the Kurds are kind of hated by everybody over there too, so they have a lot of commonalities that they share. I don't see a Muslim rising to prominence inside of Israel, nor do I see them worshiping or following after a Muslim Antichrist.
I
What say
agree.
you?
Yeah, that seems a stretch to me.
Okay, I think that is it. Let's see. Lee and I just kind of decided to do this kind of at the last minute today. So thank you, Lee, for coming on. I know you're tired and they got you running. You're running. What's going on with you? What's your schedule like?
Well, we're leaving next Wednesday night or Thursday morning, and we got a busy trip. We're going to go to Montana, then go through Wyoming to Oklahoma. Got a family reunion with all my kids in Oklahoma. Then we're going to spend 10 days in a cabin in Arkansas because I don't want to drive all the way back up to North Dakota and back down. And I'm going to take those 10 days and give it to writing. And then we've got the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Missouri. And then we have the Pre-Trib Study Group Conference in Dallas. And then I have an engagement in Texas. And then we finally drive home. And then I got January and February off, Lord willing, for writing.
And then Ireland in February, the end of February.
Yeah, the end of February. Now I do have an invite. I don't know if it's going to work out or not. We haven't ironed out the details yet, but I might be in Iowa in February because I have a couple churches down there that have invited me to come down in February.
Nice. Okay. Well, the next thing I have is just Monday Live, which is Veterans Day. So happy Veterans Day to you, Lee.
Thank
My
you.
mom is
And
in the
happy Veterans
house.
Day to you too.
Yeah, I got confused last night. I said Veterans Day was the day I got them mixed up with Memorial Day. I don't know why I did that, but it was a long night last night.
Oh yeah.
Um, my mom's in the house. Hey, mom. Let's see if I'm gonna try and catch any last things here. Thank you, Elena, and pretty good crowd tonight for a last minute discussion. A lot of
Yeah.
discussion about bacon. I love bacon. Sir Pierce
Rangers
Saville
lead the
says,
way. Amen.
yeah.
Say I should
I was gonna go.
let me get my
Go ahead.
cup. I had a guy who's the chaplain for the Ranger Association send me this cup. Ordered it.
Nice.
Yeah.
It was when I got out of basic training in January of '93, or not January, it was like March or whatever. At the time I was running my 2 miles, I was running them in about 10 minutes and 50 seconds. So I was really fast and really skinny. And I had my heart set on going into the Rangers, but I was going back into the National Guard, the reserves, and then the Guard, and it just never worked out for me. So by the time I actually went in, I couldn't change my MOS, and so I ended up just picking my location. So I picked Europe. So I was all over Europe for a couple of years. Came back to the States, did 1 year in the stateside in Georgia, then got out and went back to college. And by the time I got out of college, I was 30. I was 20. See, I was 20. Gosh, I was 23 when I started college, so I was 27 or 28 when I graduated because my degree was like 5 years. And by then I was too old and too lazy, and I had no desire. I had no desire to go to Ranger school.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, it's one of those things I wish I had done when I was a younger man. So, anyways, uh, yeah. So, thank you guys for coming tonight. Love you all. We'll see you on Monday. Check out when's your next program, Lee, for on YouTube.
Let's see here. Let me pull up my calendar really quick. It's probably going to be a video on Tuesday. A video or a live stream. I haven't decided yet. I got behind. I didn't get anything up this week. I don't think I put anything up since Sunday, and but I'm working on a really good video. It's just taken me a lot of work. It's on discernment, and it's 13 vital lessons I have learned on how tools for discerning sound doctrine and unsound doctrine.
Yeah, you got to include the quote in there from Spurgeon.
Oh, what's that one?
Discernment. Discernment's not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that. That's a good one.
I love that one. Anyways, coming from the guy that was not a dispensationalist, Spurgeon, but we love him nonetheless, and I'm sure he's a dispensationalist now.
No doubt about it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Yeah, crazy year 2024. I will do an official write-up in December for the year, and then also my forecast for 2025. Like I said, I've done them every year since 2011 or so. Check out the website, rev310.net. Check out Lee's website, www.soothkeep, SOOTH KEEP.info, soothkeep.info. And Lee has a copy of my rough draft right now for Blink, and then my mom has the other rough draft. So her and my sister will probably be reading through it and picking it apart. I expect them both back with a bunch of red lines through everything, just marked up like crazy. But yeah, I'll have that coming out. I don't know when. I'm trying to get it published through it's not a vanity publisher and it's not a full-blown publisher. It's kind of a hybrid in between, and you just send it to them. It has to be edited, line edited, and then it's got to meet their parameters. And then they basically, if they accept it, then they take it and they publish it, and then it's no cost to the author. And then you're still working and you're getting all the benefits of a traditional publishing company with the marketing and stuff. So I really
Do they
want to
try
get
and
this
put
one
it
out.
in the bookstores?
Yeah.
Oh, that nice.
Yeah. So your vanity publishers, if anybody's interested in writing a book, you'll see a bunch of ads for it. And basically you got to pay them everything. It'll end up costing you thousands of dollars to publish your book, which you may only sell like 4 or 5 copies or 100. You're not going to make your money back through a vanity publisher, but you'll have it published if that's your bucket list. You can self-publish through Amazon. Lee, you have your own impress, right? You have your own.
Well, I print under the impress of Soothkeep Press, but it's just indie publishing through Amazon.
Yeah, your books look good, man. And mine, when I've changed format, I struggle with that. I've never gotten the books right, so eventually I'll go back and republish my books legitimately. And if we have time, I don't know. That's kind of the 300-meter target right now.
Well,
I'm not
I
super
get my books
impressed with it.
done pretty well, and then I send them off to a formatter he's got a certain fixed fee, and he'll format my books for industry standard paperbacks for fiction, industry standard paperbacks nonfiction, and then he'll format them industry standard for Kindle, and then for Smashwords, which is going to go off to a whole bunch of other publishers. So he does that for me, and it cost me, I think, like over $200 to get all that done. But all the formatting is done. It works pretty good. I'm more than happy to pay someone to do that because it's a nightmare. I do all my own editing though, and all my own proofreading.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna have to get that guy's number from you.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Aldo asked which churches in Lee or in Iowa for Lee.
I'll have to post that in off the top of my head. I don't remember, but I will have it posted on my website under upcoming events, and I can also shoot a link in YouTube where I can have the comment section on YouTube. I can put something up there. So.
All right. Well, hey guys, have a good Saturday night. I think I'm going to go check out a Mormon church tomorrow, or a Jehovah's Witness. No, Jehovah's go on Saturday, or like some Assembly of God, or I'm going to go to a church I've never gone to before. Not because I will get swayed. I have some curiosities that I want to. Maybe I can plant some seeds there or something. I don't know. We'll see. I'm a new town, just finding what's around. So, all right. Have a great night, guys. I love you all, and we'll take care. We'll see you in a couple of days. All right, Lee, you can hang out if you want.
Yep.